All right, a few weeks ago I was asked to do an assessment of INEOS's 2 years at United, looking at what they've done wrong, what they've done well, and what they need to do in the short and longer term to make United successful again. I've sat on the idea for a while because I think timing is important. Yesterday there was a protest outside Old Trafford, which included for the first time protest against Sir Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS. So it feels like a good time to do it. It's interesting to do it at a time when there's been an upturn on the pitch. I know there's a lot of short-termism with some fans that will say, well, because I think in a very well-meaning way, and I don't mean to sound patronising when I say that, but that because we've been starved of anything for so long, that hope, that feeling of positivity, people get carried away with it and believe that that means that we're starting to turn a corner, or that the decisions that INEOS have made are all now coming to fruition. And there's a lot of people who sort of would be fooled into that. It's great to win games. It's brilliant that we have an opportunity to finish far higher up than I anticipated we could. And with City dropping points last night, second place isn't out of the question, although I don't think we'll get there. I still think it could go either way. But it's great to have that positivity. It's great to feel something again when you're watching the team. But I don't let that muddy the waters from the fact that I think United will never be sustainably successful with these owners, and I include INEOS in that, and that I think they're awful overall. And the fact we've won 3 games in a row and find ourselves fourth is not because of them, it's despite them. So I'm quite comfortable in being able to, for those two things to coexist. We're doing really well, that's great. It's nothing to do with INEOS, pretty much nothing to do with INEOS, although I'm going to give them their flowers to a certain degree with some of the positives that I'll talk about. But let's get into the video, the main body of it. What have they done wrong? They came in with false promises and that were very inauthentic when they came in. Sir Jim Ratcliffe said he was going to put the Manchester back into Manchester United, and then went about sacking probably half the workforce, increasing ticket prices, moving people from seats that have had those seats for 30, 40 years, taking a charitable donation of £40,000 to an ex-player's charity and cutting that, which for me was the nail in the coffin when they did that. It's inexcusable. There's cutting costs, and then there's doing something that's just in poor taste for hardly any benefit at all, and just shows you up for what you are. It's a scumbag decision to make. And we're not talking about ex-players like Nani or Rio Ferdinand or Cristiano Ronaldo. We're talking about players from the 60s, 70s and 80s who benefited massively from that charity. And it's not just what they've done, it's the way they've done it. It's the way they've gone about letting go of that half that workforce. It's the way they've gone about informing people that they have to move from their seats. And I know, because I know people personally who've been through it. And far from putting the Manchester back into Manchester United, when I speak to people who have supported the club for even longer than me, the general consensus which comes back is they've never felt so detached from the club. The matchday experience is rubbish, and it's got worse over this last couple of years, and I think part of that is because they've cut so many staff. It's complete and utter carnage. There is no thought for fan experience. The fans are customers, and I think looked upon with an element of disdain. And I've used the analogy, which I know is a very sensitive one before, of an abusive relationship. An abuser in a relationship continues to get away with it because they know they can, and that's what the Glazers have always done, and that's what INEOS, I think, almost more pointedly have done themselves. I think that they've been more blatant with it, to be honest. And I think all of that, everything I've just said, stinks. They've said things like, we're going to be right up there again within 2 or 3 years, that they're going to potentially win the league in 2028. As I said, we've won 3 games in a row. We're in a very good position. There's nothing to say. I can't prove it one way or another. We'll have to see, won't we, with time, and I hope I'm wrong. But I think that's highly unlikely to happen. Moving on to sort of more, I guess that first bit's more subjective maybe, but this bit on their decision making I think is more factual, although of course there's always going to be an element of subjectivity to anything that you talk about. Their decision making has been shocking. And it does come back actually to something that they said when they first came in, that there was going to be a very clear vision, there was going to be a very clear structure, that the director of football and the CEO were going to set the agenda in terms of the way the team was going to play. And then they've set about basically just going from one thing to another and making haphazard, chaotic decisions that have been incredibly reactive. So when they first came in, Erik ten Hag was the manager. He isn't or wasn't their manager. So rightly, they would probably, as the people that are taking on the football responsibility, they would want their own man. There's nothing wrong with that at all. We'd also had a really poor second half of the season as they were assessing everything that was going on at the club. So when it comes to the end of the season and we're in the FA Cup final against City, they, I'm sure, like most United fans, thought that we were going to get beat. So they are brazen about their interviewing process, blatantly interviewing other managers whilst Erik ten Hag was still in charge, which first and foremost can be very destabilising for a team preparing for a cup final, but secondly says that you don't want him to be the manager anymore. The counter to that would be, well, they're doing their due diligence, it's a duty of care to line up managers, yeah, but you don't let people like David Ornstein and Laurie Whitwell and Fabrizio Romano and Simon Stone, who are all creditable people in the media, you don't let them know that. You can do it quietly or you can do it blatantly, and they did it as blatantly as they possibly could, which completely undermines the manager. And if you then choose to keep him, everybody knows he's a dead man walking, and that's what happened. And in terms of their first reactive decision, they reacted by, I think, because we won the FA Cup. They gave him the bolt-on year to his contract, which meant that effectively he had 2 years left, so he didn't go into the last year of his contract. They spent money in the summer, and every single Manchester United fan I spoke to said he'd be gone by Christmas. So if we know that, punters who are just watching like normal fans, how on earth do people that you're paying a handsome salary to not figure that out? A lot of the things I'm going to talk about are all interlinked, and one of those things is Dan Ashworth. When I heard that Dan Ashworth was going to be United's director of football, I must say I was really impressed by that. We've gone and headhunted one of the best directors of football by reputation from a club that probably wants to finish in a similar position to us, although they have no heritage or history of doing that. Newcastle coming into the money as they did were I suppose I can't even say it out loud really, it's a bit weird to say it, but they were a rival, and we've gone and got their director of football. But the whole thing became a big mess. He has 6 months of gardening leave, which presents its own problems, because then one of the reasons that was given for our, lack of decisiveness with Ten Hag is that, well, we haven't really got the main guys that are going to be making this decision in the building yet. We haven't got Barada because he was on gardening leave. We haven't got Dan Ashworth because he was on gardening leave. But you've still been interviewing other managers, and I'm sure they could have a burner phone where you can have a chat with them about who they might want. So for me, that was an excuse. But the excuse existed because the two main figures at the club were on gardening leave for the first 6 months. We needed decisions making when they came in. We needed decisions making yesterday, not tomorrow or not in 6 months' time. You can't afford to get those things wrong with where we were when they came in and how far ahead everybody else is. And of course, the fact that the legacy damage the Glazers have done is so gargantuan, and the fact that they're still there. We needed everything to be right. And if you can't get someone in for 6 months, then maybe you shouldn't have appointed him. Or, with the Ten Hag thing, just leave well alone until they come in. But you didn't do that. You were interviewing other managers, so there's massive contradictions there. But the proof's in the pudding. Dan Ashworth came in and he was at the club for less time than the gardening leave he'd been on, which just looks a complete mess. I don't know the ins and outs of why he left, but one way or another, it's a complete car crash of a decision, to be honest. Then the decision to, in terms of who they replace Ten Hag with, and they go with Ruben Amorim, and they don't back him sufficiently to be able to implement the way that he wants to do things regarding his system, because it's a niche system. Maybe, I think this is probably what happened, they thought he's a really good manager, so he'll be able to come in and do what he's got. Well, in which case you misjudged it, because he wasn't good enough to do that. And they did spend money on Amorim. Can't say they didn't spend anything on him, and that they didn't give him some players. They did. But it needed far more, and they weren't able to do that. So one way or another, again, that's a mistake. It's a mistake to appoint a manager that you can't afford to back with the necessary funds needed. You've misjudged his ability, maybe. Maybe you thought he was better than he actually was. So it's another mistake. And then a year after he's been in post, when you've said we're going to give him 3 years, we've said we're going to back him with his system, effectively you ask him to change it, and then you sack him because basically he says, well, you've told me that it seems like there's confusion as to whether he's head coach or the manager, although his title was head coach, but there was obviously some kind of moving of goalposts from his perspective, at least. So all of that looks very, very messy again. They've not replaced Dan Ashworth, they've just put Jason Wilcox in there, which is a Glazer trick. We'll just move people from existing positions and make him sound like they're more important in a different position. Jason Wilcox isn't a director of football. He has no kudos or credibility in the game. He has no body of work. He has no gravitas. There's, as I said last week, if you've got Ancelotti potentially in the summer as an option to come to Manchester United, he isn't going to come when Jason Wilcox is the director of football. So it all just looks like a complete mess, to be honest with you. And that's on the pitch and the decisions they've made regarding that, but also the stuff they've done off the pitch. As I say, it's been in really, really poor taste. And your morals, your values, your principles, the feeling of a football club, the identity of a football club, the soul of a football club. The modern fan doesn't seem to care as much about that, but for me it's massively important. It's what gives you, even if you're finishing 8th, 9th, 15th, whatever, it's what gives you an identity to that club. And when I was a kid growing up watching United and we were finishing mid-table in the late 80s, you could feel the history, you could feel the sense of identity, you could feel what Manchester United is and was always at that point going to be. And kids like my lad who's 11 in April, who supports United because I support them, is relying on me to tell him about those things. He's not watching it and seeing it himself. And that's a poor indictment of what's been going on at the club for a long time, but INEOS have certainly played their part in, I would say, making that worse. That might not be important to some people, but it's very important to me. Things have got right. Even in the things they got right, they ended up getting it wrong. Initial things like Jean-Claude Blanc being involved, that seemed a really smart move. And he was rumoured to be the favourite to be the CEO, which I think I would have preferred to Omar Barada. And a guy with credibility, a guy with kudos, as I said, with gravitas, with something about him, with a body of work, with some prestige in the game, of being a CEO and being a high up at big clubs and doing a good job. And then he disappeared. But the fact he was there in the first place, I was quite impressed with. Dan Ashworth, again, I thought was a great move. It was an aggressive move. It showed intent. You've got to praise their intent, but in the end they got that wrong. I praise the intent of going and getting Amorim, because previously we'd have just got an interim manager for the rest of the season from October or November. That would have been what the Glazers would have done. So to go and get a good young coach from a good European team. It's the first time we've gone and got a manager out of a club since we did it with Ferguson in 1986. And I know a lot of that time he was the manager for 26 years, but nonetheless, for 10 years, 11 years, whatever it was, until Amorim came in, we had never done that before, even if we changed manager partway through the season. So that showed really positive intent, but again, they didn't then back it up. Their first action was good, but their next actions weren't good enough. They didn't have the direction that was needed to make it work. But I like the intent. I must say, I think Vavell seems a decent operator. Maybe getting a bit too big for his boots in terms of seemingly having a say on the manager, when for me he's a recruitment guy. But if we look at Dorgu, Aiden Heaven, they both look steals now. I don't know if we paid a fee for Aiden Heaven. Chido Obi, we're yet to see if that's going to materialise, but we brought the lad in, Diego Leon, from the Paraguayan left back. The ability to sort of have a finger on the pulse of the best young players coming through absolutely aligns with what Man United fans would want. Now it looks different now because they're not from Salford and Timperley and Stockport and Altrincham and Stretford and Wythenshawe anymore. They're from Paraguay and France and London and wherever else. That's the way of the world. But we're still, I think we're looking like we're a bit ahead of the game in terms of young players. And I actually think, by and large, their signings in general have been all right. Delic's been good. Mazraoui's good. Ugarte not so much, and Xerxes hasn't quite worked out. But I think who else. Then this summer, Lamens looked a decent signing. And Mbumo and Cunha, although it took too long for Mbumo, but still two good signings. Seshko I'm on the fence with. But their strike rate in terms of signings isn't bad. That's pretty decent. So I'd give them praise for that. I think they've probably made United more financially efficient in terms of, with some of those unpopular decisions that they made. And beyond that, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to think of any other positive things that they've done. I don't see the stadium as being a positive thing because I don't want us to move from Old Trafford. So other people can throw that in there if you want, but I don't see that as a positive at all. To be honest, I feel like there was probably more, and I'm doing them maybe a little bit of a disservice. But I actually think, this is a small thing really, but I think they've made the right decision bringing Carrick in, because, and I said that, when it was between Solskjaer or Carrick, I said I want them to bring Carrick in. I think that's a more common sense decision, but the more popularist decision and the more Glazer-like decision, and INEOS thrown in there, whether they like it or not, they are, would have been Solskjaer, and they brought in Carrick, and I think that will prove to be a good decision. But it's born out of a bad decision in Amorim. Not that there was a bad decision to sack him, but there was a bad decision to bring him in the first place. So a mistake has led to something that might end up being pretty decent. But other than that, I'm struggling for things that I think they've done well. Help me out if you think there's other things, and put them in the comments. I think one of the biggest issues, and this is what I said when they came in, was I maintain now we need a full takeover. We've always needed a full takeover. We needed the Glazers to leave this club, and we needed a completely fresh start. If we weren't going to get that and someone was going to come in and take football responsibility, that someone needed to be absolutely shit hot. They needed to get everything right pretty much. And for me, they probably needed to have a little bit more of a background in football and success in football. INEOS have no pedigree of success in football at all. With Nice, it's not gone well at all. Their fans hate INEOS. They've got a team in Switzerland, and I don't know anything about that really, but I'm pretty sure it's not like a success story, because if it was, we'd know about it. And I look at the people that they've appointed. Omar Barada was not a chief executive at City, and he's from City. It's not apples for apples, is it? They've brought in Omar Barada, who was able to be in a strategic role at City while there was experts everywhere, all around him, and basically just consistent cheating and a bottomless pit of money. We can't cheat anymore because I think City have been the cautionary tale that now the likes of Newcastle would say they're suffering for. But you certainly can't go and cheat now, and we ain't got the money to do it anyway. Where we could just City's owners are constantly trying to find ways, even if it's through illegal means, to get money into their club. Our owners are consistently taking money out of the club and looking to make more money for themselves, and INEOS are a continuation of that. So you put Omar Barada surrounded by novices into that situation and say, "Oh, he did really well at City." He did really well at City with a completely different environment around him. They're hell bent on winning. We're not. So I said at the time, we haven't got the right people in positions to be successful. And Jason Wilcox is a continuation of that. So if you're not going to have United people in those positions, all right, that's fine. But get the best people. And we haven't got the best people. So steps to over the next... the comment said next 1 to 3 and then 3 to 5 years that they need to take. They're not going to. I can say what I think, but they're not going to make these steps at all. They need to sign 7 players in the summer. If you want me to, I'll go through it again. Right back, left back, speedy centre back, 2 centre midfield players, left winger, and an experienced striker. If you want to be right up there and building a team that in 2028, 29, 30, something like that can compete for titles, you need 7 players of a certain ilk, and you also need them because probably we're going to be in Europe next season and you're going to need far more depth in your squad. So immediately, as an immediate short-term goal, we need 7 players. There is not a cat in hell's chance we're getting 7 players in the summer. Like I've said before, why go for exceptional when acceptable will do? They'll get 3 or 4 and people will go, well, that's better than what we had. Okay, it's better than what we had. Is it enough? No. Bearing in mind Casemiro is going to go in the summer. There's a chance Bruno could go. So we already, with Casemiro and Bruno there, I would argue need 2 midfield players. I'm saying what we need with those 7 players on top of what we have now. We're going to lose some players in the summer. And it's quite apt that it's on January. Well, it's not January, it's February, but it's the last day of the January transfer window today as I do this video. And we saw yesterday when Casemiro came off, the drop-off was quite significant. And we're 1 injury in the midfield away from potentially being in real trouble. But we're not going to sign anyone. Probably because they look at the league table and say, well, we're fine. Why go for exceptional when acceptable will do? That's not the ethos of champions. You don't win leagues, you don't consistently finish in top positions with that kind of mentality. You might fluke it every now and again, but you're not going to do it season in, season out. So sorry, I'm getting waylaid again. I'm getting distracted. So yeah, immediately, if you ask me what we need to do, we need to get 7 players in the summer. They need to start making the matchday experience better for the fans. Because the 2 criteria, I should have said this earlier, I've got for being a happy Man United fan. There's on the pitch and off the pitch. On the pitch, I want to see a team I can identify with that's giving absolutely everything every week, that plays relatively attractive football and tries to win. And I don't think that's entitled. I think that's fine for me to say that. And I want us to be competing in the top part of the Premier League, which for a club of Manchester United's size, prestige, income, all that kind of stuff is perfectly acceptable to think that is what you'd hope to happen season in, season out, for us to be in the conversation for domestic trophies, playing in Europe every year and being up in the top parts of the Premier League playing good football. Not necessarily winning it every year, but right up there, and you're excited about going to the games or watching it when it comes around at the weekend or midweeks. That's on the pitch. Off the pitch, I want a club that treats their fans with respect, that is inclusive of people from different backgrounds, in terms of financially. You want people that perhaps working class people to be able to afford to come to the game. And of course, if you've got a few quid, you can go and enjoy the different seats. That's fine. I'm not saying rich people shouldn't come to Man United, but there should be an affordability for people who are not earning a lot of money. It should be inclusive towards youngsters. It should be inclusive towards older fans, and fans shouldn't have to wait outside the ground when they turn up half an hour before kickoff and miss the kickoff to the game. They shouldn't miss parts of the game to go and get a drink at half time. They shouldn't be in a toilet that is where the floor is completely covered with piss because there's not enough urinals. This isn't asking a lot. So those are my two criteria for success. So I don't know what they need to do to make those things happen, but they need to make those things happen so that fans can come to the ground, a variety of fans from different backgrounds, different social economic backgrounds, that can afford to get into the stadium. Young fans need to be prioritised more. Older fans need to be treated with respect and given a chance to get tickets. And when you get there, you get in the ground nice and promptly, nice and efficiently. You're able to get a drink, you're able to have a wee if you want one. God forbid, these are like massive luxuries, aren't they? And then you take to your seat and you watch the game, and hopefully it's a decent game of football. They need to do, I don't know what they need to do to make that happen, but that's what they need to do in this next year or so, which they're not going to do because they're not interested in that. But that's what they need to do for me. In terms of staffing, which is one of the things written in the comment, was what do they need to do in terms of staff? For me, they need more experts in key positions. They need a proper director of football. They're not going to sack the CEO too far in to do that, I don't think, but they need a new director of football, without a doubt. And if United get into Europe this season, I would like them to keep Michael Carrick, because of reasons I've said before. I'm not going to go into it again. Just watch my other videos that I've done recently where I spoke about could Carrick be the permanent manager. All of my reasoning behind that is on there. With different owners, it would be different, but we haven't got different owners. And so I'd like them to make that call. In terms of the stadium, I hope it all falls flat in their face, and I want us to stay at Old Trafford. You can still do the regeneration project, you could still bring more money in, you could extend the stadium, you could make it more in line with modern stadia. You could easily do those things without knocking it down. It just costs a lot of money, but that's what I want them to do. As I say, I hope they don't get the funding for the new stadium, and I hope it blows up in their face. Because I think then they might go, or at least we get to stay at our home, which is, I don't care about Arsenal or Tottenham or City or Derby County or Middlesbrough or Sunderland or all these other clubs that have gone to new stadiums and apparently carried on being the club that they were in the past. Manchester United should play at Old Trafford, always. Longer term, so I think I've kind of said it in terms of what I would want on the pitch, but longer term, we need season in, season out to be competing for Premier League titles and the back end of European competitions, preferably the Champions League. We need expert operators in all areas of the club. We need a team that's playing great football, which is true to the values of what the club has been before, attacking football, youngsters still coming through, an identifiable way of playing, which we haven't got at the moment. Players with a humble, hungry attitude who are rewarded for what they do, but rewarded appropriately rather than disproportionately. I want us to look after our younger players better. I want mentors. I want the psychology to be worked on with young players that come through at Man United, because we've failed them time and time again. And recent history is littered with examples of that. Rashford, Greenwood, Garnacho, and I know Sancho wasn't in United's academy, but he's come through as a young player, was brought in at United. We haven't handled them, we haven't looked after them, we haven't done the things we need to do. Maybe they were difficult characters, yeah, I'm sure they were. But as a club, you have to be better at that. I want us to look after our young players in a way that makes them good people as well as good players. And if they have a career at United, great. And if they go somewhere else and make a career for themselves, great. Because again, that's what used to happen at Manchester United. And I'm not being told, or I can be told, but I'm not going to listen to it or take it seriously when people say, but times have changed. Times have changed. So the way you do the things I'm suggesting will be different, but they're still achievable. The principles, the framework of what we should be as a football club can have echoes of the past and just be done differently to achieve it. So, for me, we're fourth this season at the moment. We're fourth. We are 5 points behind third. We're 6 points behind second. We play the team that's in third at home between now and the end of the season. So it's in our hands to be within 2 points of that team. And they're struggling a bit with injuries at the moment and struggling for form. And I've got quite a few competitions to try and juggle. So short term, there's reasons to be optimistic. But my opinion is that is in spite of INEOS and the Glazers, not because of them. Because I can't point to any of the decisions they've made and say that's why we're where we are. Maybe save for the fact that at the moment they brought Michael Carrick in, which, as I said, looks a very sound decision at this present moment. But I don't want to put a dampener on what's happening with Carrick. Yesterday was a bit wacky races. Yet we found that spirit, we found that resilience and character. We are quicker to get out to the ball. They're not cutting corners. They do look like they're up for it. And it's only 3 weeks, so he needs a bit more time. But there's just a few warning signs there yesterday. I'm not sure this is going to be a Solskjaer-esque run where we win 10 out of the first 11 games and 14 out of the first 17 or whatever it was, some stupid run that he went on. If we do, you can forget talking about top 4. We're in the top 3 because with how inconsistent everybody else is, it's done. Which would be fantastic, by the way. But I maintain to then go from third to where we want to be is a massive, as in sustain that season in, season out in that top 3. Be a team that hasn't just fluked it, a team that hasn't just been opportunistic, which is great, by the way, if we can be opportunistic in a poor league, which it is in my opinion. But a team that hasn't just fluked it or has been opportunistic, a team that is going to be there on merit, season in, season out, consistently competing right at the top and ultimately trying to win Premier League titles. To go from where we are now to doing that is going to take an awful lot of investment, an awful lot of good decision making, and INEOS have showed no signs that they can do that, and no signs that they particularly want to do that. And January, as I've said before, is a shining example. Shine is the wrong word. Is a very hit you in the face example of that. Just to finish, when INEOS came in officially February of 24, the season prior to that we'd finished third under Ten Hag. Everybody agreed after finishing third under Ten Hag and winning the League Cup and reaching the FA Cup final and playing some great football in the Europa League that season, everybody agreed the Glazers needed to lead this football club. I say everybody. 99% of Man United fans would have said that. And we just finished third. We could finish fourth or third this season. We haven't moved on, have we? We're 2 years in, we haven't moved on. It's the same. It's the same as when they came in. We just finished third then. We could finish third, fourth. We could finish 6th or 7th this season, by the way. That's not what. This is open to debate in terms of where we're going to finish. But best case scenario, we could finish third again this season, I think. Doesn't mean they've done a good job. It's just maintenance. 2 years. We haven't moved forward. In terms of protest, sorry, I said I was going to finish, but I am going to finish with this. In terms of protests, yesterday was very much what we've seen before. Noise, colour, objection to what's happened over the years, banners, and nothing else. And all people are doing is complaining loudly. There's not the ingenuity, there's not the person of recognition or sway that's heading this up that's needed to lead a revolt, which is what's necessary. Manchester United need to for the Glazers and INEOS to even contemplate leaving. That ground needs to be empty, probably for 3 or 4 games in a row, and that is never going to happen. It won't even happen where there's 25,000 people in the stadium. It won't even happen where there's 50 or 60,000 people in the stadium. It will be full week in, week out. And whilst that's the case, the Glazers and the INEOS are going nowhere unless someone from the government or an independent football regulator or something like that gets involved. So everyone's got the right to complain. Everyone's got the right to free speech. Everyone's got the right to call Sir Jim Ratcliffe the C word if they want. A bit strong, but he's not my favourite person either, but it's just stating the obvious. Doesn't get rid of him, does it? That's the bigger picture here, is that we do not have the ingenuity in this fan base or the appetite to get rid of these owners. So we're just going to drift. I said it when they came in October of 2023, because that was confirmed really then, that was what was going to happen. This club ceases to be a serious football club at the top end of the English game. We will not consistently be in title races. We will not consistently be in the top 3 or 4 season in, season out with this ownership. We won't. We'll have some ups, and I think we could have some pretty bad downs. But generally speaking, in terms of being right up there, like Arsenal, City are expected to be season in, season out, like Liverpool are. Liverpool are having a bad season this season, but they'll be back. We're not going to be in that conversation, and the reason we won't be in that conversation is because of these owners, and INEOS are part of that. So that's my overview of their 2 years in charge. Let me know what you think. Glazers out.